She laughed at me in the middle of the market, and I let her do it. I stood there quietly, my fingers wrapped around the thin handle of my old basket, my shoulders slightly bent, my eyes lowered just enough to seem harmless. Anyone watching would have thought I felt nothing at all. Anyone watching would have believed I was used to this kind of thing. But inside me, something cracked so softly that no one could hear it, not even me at first. It was the kind of crack that doesn't make noise, the kind that slowly spreads through the heart, like a thin line across glass, waiting for the day it finally breaks. That morning had started like so many others. The sun was already high by the time I left my house, warm but not kind, pressing down on the roofs and the narrow streets as if it had no patience for people like me who moved slowly. I had woken early, as I always did, even though there was no one waiting for me, no husband asking for tea, no children rushing around the house. Old habits stay longer than people. I washed my face, combed my hair carefully, and wrapped my shawl around my shoulders. It was an old shawl, faded in places, with loose threads at the edges that I kept meaning to cut but never did. Somehow, those threads felt like part of me, worn but still holding on. Before leaving, I sat at the small wooden table near the window and counted my money. I did it slowly, coin by coin, placing them in a neat line as if order might make them grow. I counted once, then again, because hope makes you doubt numbers. I whispered the total under my breath, not to remember it, but to convince myself it was real. It wasn't much. It was just enough if I chose carefully, if I didn't give in to small wants, if I reminded myself that hunger doesn't care about pride. I folded the coins into a small cloth and tucked them deep into my pocket, close to my body, as if warmth might protect them. The walk to the market was familiar, almost comforting. The same cracked road, the same walls with peeling paint, the same dogs sleeping in the shade. The market itself was already alive when I arrived. Vendors called out prices in loud, tired voices. The smell of dust mixed with ripe tomatoes, green herbs, and warm bread drifting from the small bakery at the corner. That smell always made me pause. Bread has a way of reminding you of better times, of full tables and shared meals. I adjusted my shawl again, pulling it tighter around me, not because it was cold, but because being seen always made me feel exposed. I moved slowly between the stalls, greeting the vendors with small nods and quiet smiles. Some of them knew me. Some of them didn't. It didn't matter. I wasn't there to be known. I was there to buy what I could afford and go home. I stopped at the vegetable stall where the prices were written smaller, where the potatoes were not perfect but still good enough. I bent slightly to look at them, touching one or two, feeling their weight in my hand, trying to imagine how many meals they could become. That was when I heard her voice. It cut through the noise of the market like a sharp edge. Loud, clear, mocking in a way that didn't even try to hide itself. "Oh wow," she said, followed by a laugh that was too clean, too careless. "Do people still dress like that?" For a moment, I didn't move. My back was to her, and part of me wanted to stay that way. Part of me hoped she was talking to someone else, that this was just another careless comment floating in the air, not meant for me. Hope can be foolish like that. Slowly, I turned my head, not because I needed to see her, but because something inside me already knew. She was looking straight at me. She stood there as if she belonged to another world entirely. Her sandals were new and expensive, the kind that never touched dust for long. Her nails were painted carefully, not a single chip, her fingers wrapped around her phone as if it was an extension of her hand. Her clothes were clean, bright, confident. She looked at my basket first, then at my shawl, then at my shoes, and finally at my face. Her eyes didn't hold curiosity or kindness. They held judgment, quick and sharp, like she had already decided my worth before I even turned around. "Are you even sure you can afford those?" she said, her voice rising just enough for others to hear. "Maybe you should just look, not touch." Her words hung in the air, heavy and ugly. The vendor froze, his hand still on the scale. Two other customers turned to look. One woman's eyes filled with pity before she quickly looked away. A man nearby smiled awkwardly, as if embarrassed for me but not enough to say anything. The market, so loud just moments before, seemed to pause, waiting to see what I would do. I felt my face grow warm. Not from anger at first, but from that old, familiar feeling of being seen when you don't want to be. I could feel my heart beating in my chest, slow and heavy, each beat carrying years of swallowed words and quiet endurance. I thought of all the things I could say. I thought of explaining myself, of defending my right to stand there, of reminding her that dignity doesn't come with a price tag. But I didn't say any of it. I smiled. It was a small smile, careful and controlled, the kind you learn after a lifetime of surviving without making noise. I smiled not because it didn't hurt, and not because I was weak. I smiled because crying there, in front of strangers and cheap vegetables and a woman who didn't care, would have broken something inside me that I had spent years holding together. Some pains are too old to be displayed like that. She looked almost disappointed by my reaction, as if she had expected tears or anger, something more entertaining. With a small shake of her head, she turned back to her friend, laughing again, already forgetting me. To her, I was just a moment, just a joke, just a poor woman in an old shawl. But as I stood there, my smile slowly fading once she was gone, I felt the crack inside me widen just a little. Not into hatred, not into revenge, but into a quiet, heavy sadness that settled deep in my chest. She didn't know who I was. She didn't know the life I had lived, the love I had given, the strength it had taken to stand there calmly while being reduced to nothing. And she didn't care. I picked up my basket again, paid for the potatoes with steady hands, and walked away like I always did. But something had changed. That small, cruel laugh, spoken so easily in a dusty market, was standing at the edge of something much bigger than she could ever imagine. Even then, as I walked home under the same hot sun, I could feel it. This was not just a passing moment. This was the beginning of a story that would not stay silent forever. People often mistake silence for weakness, and I learned that truth very early in my life. When you do not rush to speak, when you choose to listen more than you talk, people begin to believe you have nothing to say. When you lower your eyes instead of meeting theirs, they assume you are afraid. When you walk slowly, dress simply, and keep your life small, they think you are small too. But silence is not emptiness. Silence is often a place where strength is resting. I have lived a long life, longer than most people guess when they look at my tired hands and my worn shoes. My hands tell stories my mouth rarely does. They show years of work, of cooking meals, washing clothes, holding children, wiping tears, and learning how to let go. My shoes have walked many roads, some filled with laughter, some heavy with loss. I do not replace things just because they are old. I keep them because they still serve their purpose, and because throwing things away has always felt too close to forgetting. I learned early that speaking less keeps the peace. I grew up in a house where voices were often loud, where words were thrown like stones, and I promised myself that I would not add to that noise. I watched how silence could calm a room, how patience could soften anger, how listening could heal more than arguing ever could. Over time, that way of being became part of me. It wasn't forced. It felt natural, like breathing slowly instead of gasping for air. My husband understood this about me better than anyone. He used to smile when others thought I was too quiet. "You're like a river," he would say in a gentle voice, deep and steady, even when the surface looks calm. He saw my strength not in how loud I spoke, but in how much I could carry without breaking. We built our life together quietly, without showing it off, without chasing attention. We worked hard, saved carefully, and focused on what mattered to us. When he passed away, my world became very quiet in a different way. His absence filled the house more than his presence ever had. Every room echoed with memories. His chair sat empty. His cup stayed where he left it for days before I could bring myself to move it. Grief doesn't scream at first. It whispers. It sits beside you. It breathes with you. And slowly it teaches you how strong you have to be to survive it. After he was gone, I discovered a strength I didn't know I had. Not the kind that shouts or demands attention, but the kind that gets up every morning even when there is no reason to. The kind that cooks for one without crying over an empty chair. The kind that keeps going because stopping feels worse. I learned to live with less noise and more thought, less company and more reflection. I raised my children the same way I lived, with love but not noise, with patience but not control. I never believed in ruling a home with fear or loud words. I believed in guiding with example. I taught them that kindness costs nothing and dignity belongs to everyone, not just those who wear fine clothes or drive big cars. I reminded them often that money can disappear overnight, but the way you treat people stays with you forever. When my children grew and built their own lives, I stepped back without bitterness. A mother's job, I always believed, was not to hold on forever but to prepare her children to walk without her. I watched from a distance, proud and quiet, letting them shine in their own ways. I did not interfere unless I was asked. I did not demand attention. Love does not need to announce itself. After my husband died, I chose a simple life. It was not forced on me. It was a choice. I had enough to live comfortably, but I did not see the need to display it. I did not wear gold or heavy jewelry. I did not speak of what I owned or what I had saved. I did not compare myself to others or compete in things that never brought peace anyway. I believed that pride was heavy and peace was light, and I preferred to carry less. My home reflected that choice. It was clean but not fancy, warm but not crowded with things. Everything had a place and a purpose. There were photographs on the walls, not expensive art. There were books with worn pages, not decorations meant only to impress. When people visited, they often said my house felt calm. That was always the greatest compliment to me. The market became part of my routine, a small anchor in my quiet days. I went on the same days, walked the same path, greeted the same vendors. We did not talk much, but there was understanding between us. They knew I paid on time. They knew I did not argue over prices. They knew I would take what I needed and leave without trouble. In a busy world, consistency becomes a kind of respect. Most people there knew me only as the woman who came alone, carried a simple basket, and smiled softly. They did not know my story, and I never felt the need to tell it. Life had already taught me that not everyone deserves to know your past, your losses, or your strength. Some things are safer when kept close. The woman at the market that day did not know any of this. She did not know about the life I had built slowly, carefully, with love and loss and patience woven together. She did not know the man who had loved me deeply, or the children I had raised with quiet pride. She did not know that my simplicity was not a result of failure, but of choice. To her, I was just an old poor woman with worn clothes and tired eyes. Someone easy to judge, someone easy to dismiss, someone whose silence she mistook for emptiness. And maybe, in some ways, that is exactly how I wanted it to be. Because when you stop trying to prove who you are, you gain the freedom to simply be. And I had learned, over many years, that being underestimated can sometimes be the greatest protection of all.
Even after she walked away, laughing with her friend as if nothing had happened, her words stayed with me. They did not fade into the noise of the market or dissolve into the warm air. They clung to me quietly, like dust that settles on your skin without you noticing until it is everywhere. I stood there for a moment longer than necessary, my basket still in my hands, my eyes resting on the vegetables in front of me as if they had suddenly become very important. I needed that pause, that small space to gather myself, because if I moved too quickly I was afraid something inside me might spill out. Her words followed me as I paid the vendor. I counted the coins carefully, just as I always did, my fingers steady even though my chest felt heavy. The vendor did not meet my eyes. He handed me my change with an awkward smile, the kind people give when they are relieved they are not the one being judged. I did not blame him. Silence spreads easily in moments like that. I placed the potatoes gently into my basket as if they were fragile, and nodded in thanks before turning away. They followed me down the dusty road that led home. Each step I took seemed to echo her laughter in my mind. The road looked the same as it always had, dry and uneven, lined with small houses and closed doors, but I felt different walking it that day. I walked more slowly, not because my legs were tired but because my thoughts were loud. The sun felt warmer on my back, the air heavier in my lungs. Even the familiar sounds of the neighborhood felt distant, like I was moving through them without truly being there. They followed me into my quiet home. When I opened the door and stepped inside, the stillness wrapped around me like it always did, but this time it did not bring comfort right away. The walls stood silent, the rooms unchanged, yet the peace I usually felt there was missing. I set my basket down on the table and stood for a moment, my hands resting on the edge, my head slightly lowered. It felt as though the house itself was waiting for me to say something, to react, to release what I had been holding in. I unpacked the vegetables slowly, one by one, placing them in their usual spots. My movements were careful, almost deliberate, as if I was afraid that rushing might break something invisible inside me. When everything was put away, I pulled out a chair and sat down. The wood creaked softly beneath me, a familiar sound, but even that felt louder than usual. I rested my hands in my lap and took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle on my chest. It wasn't just the insult that hurt. I had lived long enough to know that words can wound, but they can also be empty. What stayed with me was the ease with which she had spoken. The casual cruelty of it. The way her laughter came so naturally, as if kindness was something optional, something only given when convenient. As if dignity was a reward reserved for those who looked rich enough to deserve it. That thought sat heavily with me, heavier than her words themselves. I found myself wondering who had raised her. Not with bitterness, but with genuine sadness. I wondered what she had been taught about people, about worth, about compassion. I wondered if anyone had ever told her that you cannot measure a person by their clothes or their basket or the way they walk through a market. I wondered if she had ever been taught to look beyond what is visible, or if the world had only ever shown her surfaces. Then I wondered who she would become. Would she grow older carrying that same sharp laughter, that same careless judgment? Or would life one day stop her, humble her, teach her what no one else had? I did not wish her harm. I did not imagine revenge. My thoughts were quieter than that. They were filled with concern, with a kind of sorrow for a soul that seemed so certain and yet so unaware. And for the first time in many years I felt something I rarely allowed myself to feel. Anger. It surprised me not because it was violent or loud, but because it had been absent for so long. This was not the kind of anger that makes you shout or slam doors. It did not rush through me like fire. It settled slowly, deeply, like a stone placed gently but firmly in my chest. It was a calm anger mixed with disappointment. Disappointment in her, yes, but also in a world that allows such moments to pass without question. Disappointment in the silence of the people who watched and said nothing, even though I understood their silence too. It was an anger that did not demand action, but reflection. An anger that made me sit there longer than usual, staring at the table, listening to my own breathing. That night, sleep did not come easily. I lay in bed with the lights off, the room dark and familiar, yet my mind refused to rest. I kept seeing her face, the way her lips curved into that laugh, the brief look she gave me that made me feel invisible and exposed at the same time. I replayed the moment again and again, not because I wanted to hurt myself, but because my mind was trying to understand it. I turned from one side to the other, listening to the quiet sounds of the night, the distant hum of the world continuing without me. Normally those sounds comforted me. That night they only reminded me how alone moments like that can feel. I wondered why this one encounter had stayed with me when I had faced harder things in my life. I wondered why a stranger's words had reached a place inside me that grief and loss had not touched in years. What I did not know then, as I lay awake with my thoughts circling endlessly, was that this was not a moment meant to fade. I did not know that our paths were already tangled, tied by something neither of us could escape. I did not know that this quiet anger, this steady sadness, was the beginning of a change I could not yet see. I only knew that something had been stirred inside me, and once stirred, it would not return to silence so easily. A few days later I heard her name, and the sound of it felt heavier than it should have. It was not spoken to me, not said with any meaning or care, but it reached me all the same, slipping into my ears when I was least prepared for it. Some truths do not arrive gently. They wait until you are sitting quietly, thinking you are safe in the ordinary moments of life, and then they settle into your heart without asking permission. That morning I had gone to the bank to take care of something simple, something I had delayed for too long. The building was old and crowded, filled with the low hum of voices, the shuffling of feet, and the quiet impatience of people waiting their turn. I took my place in line and sat down on one of the hard chairs near the wall. As always, I folded my hands neatly in my lap and kept my eyes lowered. Waiting had never bothered me. I had learned long ago that time moves whether you fight it or not. Behind me, two women were talking loudly, their voices rising above the steady noise of the room. They spoke with the ease of people who believed their words were not meant to be overheard, even though they made no effort to lower their voices. Their laughter came easily, spilling out between sentences, carrying the sharpness of gossip that had been passed around more than once. "Did you hear?" one of them said, her voice full of excitement as if she was sharing something important. "She's marrying into a powerful family." The other woman responded quickly, almost eagerly, as though she had been waiting for this exact moment. "Yes, yes, I know," she said. "She's from the market area, you know. Very proud girl. Very sharp tongue. People say she doesn't look down, only ahead." At that moment something inside me tightened. My heart skipped a beat, just one, but it was enough to make me sit a little straighter. I did not turn around. I did not look at them. I kept my gaze on the floor, on the small crack near my shoe, but my attention sharpened in a way it hadn't before. When you hear a story brushing too close to your own life, your body knows before your mind does. I listened carefully, my hands still folded in my lap, my breathing slow and quiet. I told myself not to jump to conclusions, not to assume. Many people marry. Many people come from markets. Many people are proud. But something about the way they spoke, the tone they used, pulled me back to that dusty morning, to that laughter that had followed me home. They continued talking, unaware of me, unaware of the way their words were settling into my chest. They spoke of her future as if it was already written, as if her confidence had guaranteed her success. They spoke of her ambitions, her boldness, the way she never hesitated to say what she thought. One of them laughed and said that the girl believed money made her better than others, that she had no patience for people she considered beneath her. Each sentence felt like another thread tightening around my thoughts. I could see her again so clearly, standing at the vegetable stall, her phone in her hand, her eyes sharp with judgment. I could hear her voice, feel the sting of her words, and suddenly those moments no longer felt random. They felt connected, as if they had been waiting for this missing piece to appear. Then one of the women said the family name. My family name. It was spoken casually, without ceremony, as if it was just another detail in a story meant to entertain. But to me it sounded loud, echoing through the room, bouncing off the walls, pressing in from all sides. I closed my eyes slowly, not because I wanted to escape, but because I needed a moment to steady myself. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, as if everything had shifted without moving at all. So this was not a stranger. This was not just a passing cruelty from someone I would never see again. This was someone whose life was already moving toward mine, whose future was being tied to my past without either of us realizing it until now. This was someone who would soon walk into my home, sit at my table, eat the food prepared by my hands, and speak to me with a familiar word meant to mean closeness. Family. The thought settled slowly, painfully. I imagined her standing in my doorway, dressed well, confident, unaware. I imagined her voice in my home, her laughter filling rooms that had known so much silence. I imagined her eyes looking at me again, perhaps with recognition this time, perhaps with confusion, perhaps with something else entirely. And through all of it, one truth remained clear and heavy. She had no idea who I was. She did not know that the woman she had mocked in the market carried the same name as the family she was so proud to marry into. She did not know that the quiet old woman with the worn shawl was not someone outside her future, but someone standing right at its door. The irony of it felt sharp and strange, not cruel but unsettling, like a truth revealed too late to be ignored. I sat there until my number was called, my body moving on habit alone. I completed my business at the counter, my voice calm, my hands steady, even though my thoughts were anything but. When I stepped back outside into the sunlight, the world looked the same, yet everything felt different. The sky had not changed. The street had not changed. But I had. As I walked home, I realized that what I had felt in the market was not the end of something, but the beginning. A quiet beginning, unfolding slowly, drawing two lives together in ways neither of us had chosen. And somewhere deep inside me, beneath the calm and the patience and the years of silence, a question began to form, not loud enough to frighten me but strong enough to stay. What happens when the person who looks down on you learns your name? The wedding preparations started quickly, far more quickly than I expected, as if once the decision had been made, everything else rushed forward without stopping to breathe. One day my life was still and predictable, shaped by routine and quiet mornings, and the next it was filled with ringing phones, messages passed through relatives, and voices speaking over one another with excitement and authority. Dates were discussed, venues imagined, guest lists stretched and trimmed. Everyone seemed to have an opinion, and every opinion came with urgency. The calm I had carefully built around myself for years began to ripple, then tremble. Calls were made without warning, sometimes early in the morning, sometimes late in the evening. I would answer politely, listening more than speaking, responding only when necessary. Decisions were taken quickly, often without asking what I thought, and I did not protest. I had learned long ago that resisting noise only makes it louder. So I stayed quiet. I watched. I listened. I observed the way people's voices changed when they spoke about money, about status, about appearances. I noticed how excitement often left little room for thoughtfulness. My home, which had always been a place of rest, began to feel like a waiting room. Relatives came and went, some smiling warmly, some distracted, already imagining future celebrations. Chairs were moved. Cups were filled and emptied. Laughter echoed through rooms that had once held silence like a gentle companion. I welcomed everyone with the same calm smile, offering tea, offering space, offering patience. Inside, I remained steady even as I felt the air shifting around me. Through all of it, I thought of her. I thought of the girl from the market, the sharp laughter, the careless words. I wondered if she knew yet. I wondered if anyone had told her. And a quiet part of me wondered how it would feel when our paths finally crossed again, not in a dusty market but under my roof. The day she came to my home arrived without drama, almost casually, as if it was just another step in a process already decided. I heard her before I saw her, her voice carrying through the doorway, confident and light, familiar in a way that made my chest tighten. I was standing near the window when she walked in, dressed carefully, her posture straight, her presence filling the room before she spoke another word. She walked in with confidence, her head held high, her eyes moving quickly from one corner to another. She took in the furniture, the walls, the quiet order of the space, as if she was measuring it against something in her mind. There was no recognition on her face at first. No pause. No sign that she saw anything more than an old house and an older woman standing quietly to the side. I watched her closely, not with anger, not with judgment, but with a kind of deep curiosity. I wanted to know how truth reveals itself in a person's eyes. I wanted to see what happens when memory catches up with reality. She spoke politely to others in the room, her voice smooth, practiced. She smiled easily, confidently, the way people do when they believe they are in control. Then slowly her eyes came back to me. They lingered for just a moment longer than before. I saw the change happen in that moment, small but unmistakable. She didn't recognize me at first. Then she did. I saw it clearly, the way you see a shadow move across a wall. Her smile faltered just slightly. Her eyes narrowed, not in anger but in confusion. Her gaze traveled from my face to my clothes, from my shawl to my hands, as if she was searching for proof that what she remembered could not possibly belong here. Time seemed to slow, stretching that single second into something much larger. I saw the pause. I saw the confusion. I saw the fear. Fear does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like stillness. Sometimes it looks like a smile that comes too late. She smiled again, but this time it was different. It was careful. Hidden. The confidence that had filled the room moments earlier softened, then retreated. Her eyes flicked away and back again, as if she was hoping the memory would fade, that the connection would disappear if she didn't look at it too closely. I did not speak. I did not move. I simply stood there in my simple clothes, in my quiet home, meeting her eyes with the same calm expression I had worn at the market. There was no need for words. The truth was already rising between us, slow and steady, impossible to stop. In that moment, I understood something I had learned many times in my life but had never felt so clearly. Sometimes the greatest lesson is not spoken. It is revealed. It arrives quietly, without accusation or explanation, and it leaves the person who receives it alone with their own thoughts. I saw her swallow, saw her straighten her shoulders as if trying to hold herself together. I saw the questions forming behind her eyes. Who is she? How is this possible? What have I done? She did not ask any of them. He did not need to. The answers were already surrounding her, woven into the walls, the name she was about to carry, the family she was stepping into. I felt no victory, no satisfaction, only a deep, steady calm. I had not planned this moment. I had not waited for it, but I understood its purpose. Life has a way of teaching lessons when people are finally ready to see them. As the room filled again with voices and movement, I remained where I was, quietly present, allowing her to sit with what she had just realized. This was not the end of her lesson. It was only the beginning. And for the first time since that morning in the market, I knew that silence was no longer just my shield. It was my strength.